Hey everybody! So this video is going to be a little more meta than usual. We're going to be going over something that I learned very recently, and I didn't cover it before because this information had been out for quite a while. There was a very interesting IGN article where I'm getting a lot of my information from that I will be linking below. And it is fairly serious and it revolves around the developer Deck9, who has developed and has been developing Life is Strange games from Before the Storm onward until the present. And originally I was going to do a video about possible sequels to Double Exposure, sort of go over what's next for the series, but when I came across this I felt like I needed to cover it. But we're going to be going over the surprisingly troubled and toxic development of Life is Strange True Colors. So how did we get here with Deck9 developing Life is Strange games? Well, as we all know, Don't Nod is the original creator of Life is Strange. They developed the first game as well as the sequel, Life is Strange 2. However, when they were working on Life is Strange 2, they sort of delegated a prequel to Deck9, and that's how we got Before the Storm, which was developed by them. And with Before the Storm, there were obviously a few inconsistencies with the lore and certain aspects of the game, but overall I would say it fit fairly well within the established Life is Strange universe at that time. And the other reason for this is because Square Enix is the publisher of Life is Strange, and they own the rights to the series, so really they can delegate it to whoever they want. And they can order a new sequel whenever they feel like they want to. I would say overall, Deck9's performance with the Life is Strange series has been a critical success. However, on the fan side of things, I feel some believe that they are a bit lacking. However, I think a lot of that comes from nostalgia for the first game. Nothing's going to be able to live up to the experience of playing that first game week by week. I'm not saying there aren't issues with the Deck9 Life is Strange games. However, I think some people don't judge them on their own merit. Critically, these games are very, very successful. They garner great reviews, always get nominated for Game of the Year, among other awards, so it's not like they aren't artistically well made. But let's set the stage a little more before we get into True Colors' rocky development. Life is Strange Before the Storm didn't have a very easy development cycle either. It came down to what happens more and more in the gaming industry now, time crunches. Specific details about the time crunches all the way back in Before the Storm are a little scarce. There isn't too much documented about it. However, in interviews relating to True Colors, many of the people involved would reference similar practices in Before the Storm. And yes, True Colors also went through a series of time crunches as well as some other stuff that I'm going to get into. But once again, this practice continued even into True Colors. Many of the employees felt that Square Enix had sort of, and this is quoting the article, sold Life is Strange to the lowest bidder, basically saying that they're just trying to get another game out so they can keep making money off of this thing. One employee said they worked up to 80 hours a week for an entire month, saying that it wasn't necessarily mandated or forced on them, but it was just that there was simply too much work to get done that they had to. This was a necessary thing. And so this disdain for Square Enix boiled more and more and more. One employee even directly called Square Enix London a bunch of bullies. And just that the overall attitude of Square Enix towards Deck9 was sort of just, hey, get this thing done so we can put this out. It wasn't really that they had a lot of care or attention that they would give to this game. Another employee said that the disdain towards Square Enix started for a different reason, that they were a little too hands-on with the script. Now, Square Enix, like I said, does own Life is Strange. However, the decisions that they were making within the writer's room, sort of overriding the creative team behind True Colors, didn't really fall in line with what many see as Life is Strange's core message, which, if I may say, I feel that the Life is Strange series revolves around telling stories of very, very diverse different people. Every protagonist is fairly different from one another, usually being queer or of a different gender. Really, there's a lot of variation in those protagonists, and I feel the purpose of that is so that there's a lot of diversity, and there's a lot of different people who can grab onto these characters, and it's not a traditional video game character. It's someone that they can directly relate to. And not to mention that I feel I'm not alone in that view of the game. One of the things I noticed is that 9 times out of 10, the other Life is Strange fans that I've met, including myself, tend to be queer in some way, whether they're bisexual, whether they are gay, transgender, whatever it may be. I feel that the vast majority of this audience is queer in some way, which is funny because Square Enix, according to a developer, said that Square Enix told multiple developers that they didn't want Life is Strange to be thought of as the gay game, which, as someone who is a content creator that makes a lot of videos about Life is Strange and games within that sphere, I feel like some people do kind of view it as the gay game, and that's not a bad thing. It's sort of almost a safe space for people like that. They can find stories of characters that they really relate to. So I think that's just such an odd thing that they flat out would say that. And here's a quote from Mallory Littleton, a narrative designer from Life is Strange True Colors. She said, "There's a lot of press out there praising True Colors for having the first bisexual lead in a Life is Strange game. Even our press guides from Square Enix, all the way up until review copies were out, said not to say anything about Alex's sexuality, period, at all. And then they did the advanced copies, and all of these reviews came out saying how amazing it was to finally see an explicitly bi protagonist. And after that, Square was like, just kidding, Alex is absolutely, canonically, 100% bisexual." So even then, they didn't want her being bi to be one of the main things about the game, but then when it became sort of a profitable thing, because critics liked it, then suddenly they were kind of into it. And you can understand how the developers, the people actually working on the games, writing for these characters, hell, even the actors playing them, even though they're not as involved in the long-term development of the game, would be confused and sort of hurt, maybe even feel that they're being pulled back and forth over and over because Square Enix is insistent that we don't want it to just be the gay game. But then at the same time, as soon as the critical reviews come out in favor of it, then suddenly, oh, actually, no, we're this way. And I want to clarify, there is a big difference in my mind as someone who writes, and typically I like to write screenplays. I feel like there's a big difference between saying, don't say anything about the sexuality, that's not what we're here for, we don't want this to be the gay game, versus I have a character who is part of a minority group, whether that is a specific race, or a sexuality, or sexual orientation, or gender identity, and I don't want the focal point of their character to be that thing. I want them to be a strong character, a well-written character, who happens to be blank. I think there's a big difference between those two mentalities. So I want to clarify the big difference between that. They are not trying to be progressive in the sense of, oh, just don't talk about it because we don't want that to be the focal point. No, this is a business decision on their part. And once again, you can understand the frustration from developers who talk directly with fans who view Life is Strange as that sort of very queer, safe sort of space and a way of seeing these stories about people like them. There were also other issues with just a general toxic environment, things such as harassment, transphobia, and other issues. In the Deck 9 sort of workplace, it felt that women were more of a PR tool to say how progressive we are, that we have a woman who's the lead narrative designer on our game, or things like that, that it was more of a PR thing to say, hey, look how progressive we are, when in reality, if somebody, particularly a woman, wanted to get a promotion or felt that they deserved one and had been working there for the certain amount of time and had all the proper credentials to get it, they said that it was very rare to see them get any meaningful promotions or pay bumps, and it was really seen as a team effort. Many people in the staff, both male and female, had to email these recommendations and really push for a woman to be promoted in a meaningful way. I don't want to get this part twisted. While yes, it is a toxic environment, and trust me, we will get into more of the toxic work environment specifically at Deck 9. I think I want to say that there are plenty of great people who do work there, great people who care about the games, who care about the fan base. This video is not a whole, oh, let's hate on Deck 9, they're all so horrible and this and that. It's just that there are a few bad eggs, and certainly pressure from Square Enix did not help, and that there is a real problem here, and that the development of True Colors, this is something that needs to be considered when looking at the game, I feel. Real quick, I'm going to say someone by name. This is all alleged. This is not slander. This is just according to my source, which is the IGN article, which you can read below. So from here on out, it is alleged. Zach Garris is considered to be, by most employees, probably one of the biggest single people responsible for the bad work environment at Deck 9. This is for various reasons. For example, he would often blow up at people in the office. He often would contradict writers, and we will get into specific examples of everything. I'm just setting the scene for this next part, which I feel is the most problematic behavior that he had within Deck 9. So Zach would often become friends with younger female developers, and he would often take a mentorship role. Lilton recalled, "He would walk me to my car, and I'd open the door and say goodbye, and he would sort of linger. We'd keep talking, I'd sit down, he'd linger again next to the door. He never made a particularly overt move. It was always subtle enough. It felt like maybe always just a vibe I was getting. I felt stupid, first of all, for ending up in that situation with him in the first place. But he never clearly made a move, so maybe I was just reading too much into the whole thing. It wasn't until I explained in great detail to others that someone clued me in." To build on that, many others would go on to accuse Zach of love bombing. Basically, helping, always being there, wanting to go to dinner, asking these female coworkers out to lunch after long hours, and sort of inserting himself into their lives. The thing that also adds on to this, because you can sort of, if you want to play devil's advocate, oh, well, he's just being nice, and she said there was no overt things. Well, what did I say earlier? Oftentimes he would lash out at people very publicly, very loudly at work, and what this did is create a sense of you can't really say no to this guy because he will blow up at you and it will not end well for anybody involved. So he's setting a precedent that he will blow up if things that he wants gets denied or if there's a disagreement. So now that adds that extra malicious layer on top of everything that really puts into frame how his actions are not just out of the kindness of his heart. He is genuinely being malicious and predatory in this work environment. I mentioned earlier that he would often get into disagreements with the writers of Life is Strange True Colors. Particularly, one employee recalled an interaction where he said he didn't think representation mattered because he didn't necessarily identify with every white man protagonist, and so other people shouldn't identify with characters because they look the same. But I think we can all agree that that statement is problematic for many reasons, and that one thing I will never understand, I even wrote it when I was doing this research, is how you can end up working on a project like this, like Life is Strange, and not understand the importance of diversity and inclusion, even if you are a white, straight male, for example. There is empathy. Empathy exists. It appears that very early in Life is Strange True Colors development, a transgender character was removed from the game. And it also appears that Zach Garris, had a very heavy hand in this character's removal. And I believe that the only remnants of this character is probably Steph's ex-girlfriend, who we can hear the memory of when you're on the balcony, and I believe it's talking about how she doesn't want to stay in the town because she's the only transgender person there, and it sort of makes her uncomfortable. Later in the development of True Colors, Deck 9 started to implement an anonymous tool for basically reviewing other coworkers, a way that privately you could say if you were having an issue with someone. While this is good, it did come at the end of development, which didn't, it's not going to undo things in the past. However, this created an avenue for many of the people involved to reach out and express their issues that they had been having with just the general work environment, as well as with Zach Garris specifically. However, management did nothing with all of these complaints, despite many employees telling IGN that they did reach out and they did give their specific stories about Zach Garris. But in the end, he would actually end up quitting voluntarily. Makes me wonder if there was anything maybe under the rug, something kind of quiet, where management went to him and said, hey, we don't want this thing to break. Basically sort of helping him out even though he doesn't necessarily deserve it. But the story with Zach doesn't end there. Once True Colors launched to critical acclaim, they wanted to expand and create more Life is Strange games, spin-offs, continuations. If True Colors hadn't performed well critically, we would have never gotten Double Exposure, which I know that one is a whole mixed bag of opinions for some people, but I really enjoyed it. Deck 9 was struggling to figure out what they wanted to do next for the Life is Strange series. So, they proposed bringing Zach Garris back to the team. Once news of this got to the team at Deck 9, who developed Life is Strange specifically, they lost it. They basically bombarded their HR, their management, everybody they possibly could, begging them not to bring Garris back. Even one employee allegedly went to HR and said, look, if they bring him back, you guys are liable for whatever he does because we have made you aware of his past behavior, and if they bring him back, we're not holding back either. Then the CEO and CFO of the company basically fought back, saying that they needed Garris. So what happened? Many lead writers, fully prepared, turned in their resignation letters, basically saying it's him or us. And that's what finally got them to relent, and Garris did not return. And this is where we're kind of coming full circle. The reason this article was written to begin with, because I'm sure if you know anything about it, or if you clicked on the link, you've seen the headline and wondered why I haven't said anything about it yet. In the midst of this fight to bring back Garris, they were looking over the game, basically polishing things for an upcoming patch, and they noticed something. It was an in-game sign that incorporated the word "sheet" in what seemed to be a reference to a racist meme. The individual flagged this as problematic and was assured at the time that it would be changed. But then the same meme resurfaced somewhere else within the game, followed by something even more disturbing, a symbol of the number 88. This is widely used as a dog whistle or a hate symbol which references Hitler. This other person once again flagged it, went to their superiors, and needed this to be dealt with, which they were assured once again, but this opened the floodgates. People began to talk and began to notice many different horribly racist and offensive symbols that were hidden within True Colors. One of these other ones being the number 18, which is once again referencing the Mustache Man. So while HR was trying to sort this all out, this led to a very uncomfortable discussion between all of the developers on Life is Strange True Colors. Basically, who is doing this and why are they using a game like Life is Strange to promote hate speech? At first, people thought that maybe it was just an innocent use of the number 88 or 18 without knowing that it was this sort of dog whistle kind of thing. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. Elizabeth Ballou, a former narrative designer at Deck 9, had this to say: I have tried to hold space for the idea that one person made a bunch of extremely unfortunate coincidences. It is really hard for me to believe that, especially because we asked them to remove the meme and they kept it there, but smaller. So either this was a case of the worst miscommunication known to mankind, or Occam's razor. Simplest explanation is that someone was trying to see how many of these things they could get away with before someone else noticed. So why are we talking about this? Why did I feel the need to make a video about this, to bring this up, and why is it important? This shows me that there is a very serious and systematic, it's a problem with the system itself within Square Enix, down to Deck 9, and all of the employees. Not that one person is going rogue. That's not the moral of this. The moral is that they have a problem. And if we don't hold them accountable, make this aware that this is not okay, the treatment of employees, the entire situation with Zach Garris, as well as this one person going rogue and leaving these symbols within the game, none of that is okay. If we don't hold them accountable, if we don't make sure it's very clear how this fan base feels about it, nothing's ever going to change. we're going to continue to have a declining product because of these horrible working conditions for these people. It's going to lead to more and more outbursts like this. So I know I'm late to the party, but it felt necessary, especially since I had been doing research on a separate video about the future. I think that to talk about the future of the series, you need to be aware of these issues because I think it heavily factors in to those conversations. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a little more serious and a little more real than normal. Please stay safe out there. It is a tough winter for me, at least. So I can't imagine what you guys are going through wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and have a good morning or evening or, whatever.